Well, when the blade's done, when the blade's out, you
Yeah,
know,
get
when
it.
it's when it's running, but otherwise it's like a
Still,
giant,
yeah,
you know,
yeah.
an electric.
Yeah.
I think we're gonna have to go.
That's right.
Just through all that.
Yeah,
and then we get to the.
So we, and what's nice about it, go online.
I think this is-
So we have that, like, weed whacker, we had the blower, and the hedge trimmer, and then bolting to see that.
All right, we'll call the City of Kewaunee Common Council meeting for September 11th, 2023 to order. Let the record show all members are present with the exception Zimmerman excused. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance and a brief moment of silence for the victims of our 9/11 tragedy. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please be seated. Okay, item 3, approval of August 14th, 2023 Common Council minutes and August 14th, 2023 Special Council minutes. Do we have any additions or corrections?
I would like to make a correction. Beth Conley was the left out of the special common council minutes.
He wasn't shown as present?
Correct. He hasn't shown as present. So I make a motion to approve with that correction. A second.
Okay. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Next item, 4, public comment communications, 3-minute time limit per person. Is there anyone here that wishes to speak under public comment this evening? Is there anyone that wishes to speak under public comment this evening? Seeing none, we will close public comment. 5, boards, commissions, committee and staff reports. Personnel Committee, Public Property Committee, Plan Commission, Finance Committee, Public Works Committee, and staff reports.
Just a note, I did not see public property committee minutes. There was an agenda, but no minutes.
Noted.
Otherwise, I would move to approve. I'll
Second.
1 second. Kathy? Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Mayor's report. 6A, proclamation in honor of Alderman Robin Nelson's service on the Lighthouse Preservation Committee. Presented to Robin S. Nelson, whereas Robin S. Nelson has served the city of Kewaunee as an 8-year member of the Lighthouse Preservation Committee, both as a council representative and as a citizen member. And whereas she helped found the Friends of the Kewaunee Pierhead Lighthouse nonprofit preservation oriented group specifically to oversee rehabilitation of the historical lighthouse. And whereas she has dedicated years to the preservation and tours of the Pierhead Lighthouse to honor the city's commitment to maintaining community connection to and interest in the lighthouse's preservation. And whereas her commitment to the city's preservation efforts with respect to the Pierhead Lighthouse has been exemplary and a great example to the citizens and residents of the city. Now, therefore, it be resolved that the Council for the City of Kewaunee, and on behalf of all its citizens, do hereby express its sincere appreciation and thanks to Robin S. Nelson for her distinguished service to our community, and commend her for the dedication to lighthouse preservation, tourism, and community involvement. And be it further resolved, which the City Council extends to her sincere thanks for the many years of service to the lighthouse preservation effort and best wishes for the future, dated this 11th day of September 2023.
I'm sure you don't want to hear any more about the lighthouse, so.
I will give you a moment if you'd like to say something.
No, thank you. I think I've said enough.
Well, we appreciate it very much, Robin. Thank you. All right, 6B, recommend appointments for confirmation by Common Council. 1, Board of Zoning Appeals, Jim Brewster as alternate number 2 appointee to a 3-year term expiring April 30th, 2026. Do we have a motion?
I'll move.
Is there a second? Nelson? Any further discussion?
What is alternative number 2 appointee mean?
So correct me if I'm wrong, I'll let Heath just.
The Board of Zoning Appeals is under state statute allowed to have 5 permanent members. Well, called permanent members, and then 2 alternates in case 1 or 2 members of the regular board are not able to serve for various reasons, either because they can't be there at a meeting physically or because they have a conflict of interest. So it allows them to have up to 2 alternates under state statute. And Jim would fill the remaining alternate spot.
But I did convince him. All right, is there any further discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you, Jim.
I didn't vote, by the way. Just so you know, for the record.
Well, if you don't vote, your vote is considered goes with the majority, so next time recuse yourself, that's what you want to do.
We have no unfinished business. 8, new business, 8A. Resolution 2023-2031. Approving a proposed certified survey map for a portion of the property located at tax parcel number 31-241 GL 18-2-12.3 JR Real Estate Properties LLC applicant.
Yeah, this is the follow-up action to the previous request to basically carve off the driveway for their purposes. The only thing we want to make sure of is that there included some kind of easement to allow people to have access to get to the trail from the parking area, which would be located at the south end of the driveway right next to the state highway. But that's, other than that, everything else seems to be in order.
So what you're asking for then in this motion would be to approve this CSM, but we will include the language then at this time,
Yeah, we'll make sure we'll.
or that'll be later.
Yeah, we'll make sure to add it as to the CSM before it's signed.
Okay.
So,
Will the council see it again or?
no, it's just all we're looking for is to say. The parcels approved subject to an ingress easement for pedestrian purposes or bicycles to be able to access the drive to get up to the trail. From the
So then the motion will be to approve the CSM with conditions noted in this recommendation.
Yes.
Does everyone understand the motion? Okay, do we have a motion?
Also move.
I'll second.
Any further discussion? Do we need a roll on this or no? Not money, right? So all in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? Motion carried. 8B, resolution 2023-2032, approving the proposed amended boundaries and project plan amendments for tax incremental district number 3.
I'm gonna turn this one over to Adam Riegel of Robert W. Garrett Company.
We've got a nice binder. Welcome.
Thanks. Yeah, thank you. All right,
It's for the most-
so
That's the next one.
that's the next one.
Okay,
You're
good.
gonna be talking a lot, so. What we're here to talk about tonight specifically with tax increment district number 3 is this is the amendment process. So kind of to recap where we've kind of been through the whole process, it starts off with meeting with staff and kind of talking about potentially what they would want to do. What we looked at was potentially creating a new TIF district versus kind of amending. And when we looked at that, the main reason for this amendment is to include parcels that are currently zoned waterfront. And there's a potential developer that wants to redevelop those parcels, as well as potentially doing some water and sewer extensions throughout that kind of area. So when we looked at that, we kind of had 2 options, either one, create a new TIF district or look at potentially amending. Well, with tax increment district number 3, it still has a pretty good shelf life on it for an expenditure period. So when we looked at that, we kind of weighed the pros and cons. And because of that, it made sense to look at doing an amendment in this case versus kind of going through the whole new creation process. So what we had to do is we had to go through kind of the same process. We had an organizational joint review board meeting on August 22nd, where essentially all the tax entities got together. They got to hear kind of everything going on. We then went to the public hearing stage where the plan commission then on August 24th had their meeting, which then the public had an opportunity to kind of look at everything and voice any concerns or questions. The main things that kind of came out of the plan commission meeting was in regards to the performa. So the performa originally was, when we talked about it a little bit, there was a request from the plan commission to look at actually having that shift to be a PAYGO. And then potentially we also put in some language where if that wouldn't work out, you still have the option then obviously to fund it. So we've got a couple of different kind of financial parameters or options that we put in here. But really, that's the only changes that came out of the plan commission meeting was to basically look at updating the performa. When you look at the information that's in your packet, that performa now is showing. We'll get to that in a second. I'll just kind of walk you through briefly what's in the project plan. So as part of the requirements, obviously with the DOR, some of the things that we have to do is basically kind of include certain information. So we have to list out all of the individual members that make up all of the committee meetings. So you'll see that's in the packet. Then we're required to kind of do a territory amendment description. So we have to talk about the reason of why we're doing the amendment. So as we talked about, we're looking at adding about 29 parcels that essentially would be for redevelopment of these parcels that are specifically zoned WFD or waterfront. Their proposal is basically about a $2 million in increased construction increment that is being proposed with this district. And then this is the first amendment out of 4 that you can do for a tax increment district. Some of the things we had to look at then was how this would impact the 12% requirement. So what happens is with your equalized value, that is done every August, you can have more than 12% of your equalized value in tax increment districts. So that's something that we have to check out. I'll get to that in a second, but you guys are certainly fine within that area. Then what we have to do is kind of work with the engineering firms to include new maps. So we had to update basically the boundary map because when you're adding 29 parcels, one of the rules with TIF districts is everything has to be continuous. So you can't have kind of spot parcels. So that was one of the things you have to do is you have to show the current TIF district and then kind of the proposed amendments. Then look at specifically what the new territory is with both parcels, kind of identifying those. You then look at your half-mile boundary. So how the half-mile boundary works is what is considered to be your TID parcels. Everything within those parcels, then within a half mile, you can technically use tax increment to fund projects. So what happens is if there's any new development that occurs on those projects that creates an increment, you can use that new tax base to essentially fund projects in the half-mile boundary. So you could do road projects, you could do a developer incentive. The only big difference in that half-mile boundary is anything new that's created that would generate increment does not go into the TIF. It goes back to all of the entities. That's kind of the caveat they have with the half-mile boundary.
Say that one more time.
So what happens with that is you can fund a project. So let's say you were going to, use an example, you're getting a new restaurant that's coming into town. You could give increment or you could use tax increment from a project to basically fund that. The difference is because it's in the half-mile boundary, that new increment does not go back into the TIF. It goes into all the taxing jurisdictions just like normal. So, okay. So then we also have to kind of showcase the current and planned existing and uses. So we have a new map kind of detailing that out as well as what's potentially indicated for the future. And then we have to include some maps, specifically the one I'm looking at on page 13 that talks about the project. So you can see we've got an area that specifically is kind of shaded in red. That's for some environmental remediation assistance directly related towards the potential project. And then we have a blue area that indicates kind of the water and sewer infrastructure improvements that are going to be occurring.
You're saying page 13?
Of the project plan, yes.
Okay, so we don't.
So,
Okay.
I think that was in the packet.
No, it's not.
Oh,
No.
okay.
That's, so the map is missing. That's what I was kind of curious about.
Oh, okay. I apologize. I thought you guys had a copy of the map.
We had a copy of it at the plan commission.
Yeah.
We didn't have a copy, but it wasn't in the agenda.
Oh.
In the agenda packet. And I didn't bring the map. I didn't bring a copy of the map with me either, but
Then what I can do,
You can just draw it on a whiteboard, would that be okay?
I can show you it if you want to see it. So I'll kind of do this. So as you can see here, this is what is being proposed for the district. So right here is the environmental remediation parcels. And then particularly these are basically the streets that would be used for the right of way.
Okay.
Makes sense. And so the red is where the potential development's occurring, and then the blue is the water and sewer lines that we'd be using to get there.
yeah,
Makes sense there. See that there? You got the red area? Yep. Okay.
And could you forward that to us just via email?
Yes, I think Joanne you guys should have a copy of the most updated version. So yes, after this, we can certainly send that to you.
Thanks.
So then within the project plan, one of the things we have to do then is list out all of the parcels that now make up the district. So you'll see there's 29 parcels that essentially have been added. So that has the list. We have to basically list out the acreage, the land value, the improved value there. Then what we go to then is the equalized valuation test. So you're going to see in this document, there is a test then where we look at the 2023 projected equalized value. Right now, that's about 509 million. The limit for the 12% test puts it at 33. And so then the increment value we're looking at is about 16. So there's 16 million that is being proposed for this. 33 is kind of your cap. So you're well below. We're anticipating that with this, you're going to be at about 6%. So not an issue there. Then one of the things we have to do is kind of list particularly the projects that are being done. So you're going to find in the project plan, there are two areas. One is for $500,000 that's being related towards environmental remediation. Another is $250,000 for kind of water and sewer infrastructure. And the big thing with that is you have some flexibility there because obviously with inflation and everything occurring, those numbers may change. So we do have some language in here that you do have the ability to kind of increase costs or increase estimates without having to go back and do a project plan amendment. The general rule of thumb, though, is if all of a sudden you're, completely out of whack with a number, so you have 250 and it's now 1.5 million, you might want to consider doing an amendment then to kind of include those costs. Just the DOR kind of appreciates that. One of the things then we have to include is the city attorney opinion. So you will find in this document that the document has been reviewed by the city attorney. Found that so far we're following and kind of checking off all the boxes, so we're doing good there. And then what we include then is kind of a project plan performance. So you're going to find in this document that essentially we have to include the original project plan that was done back in 2000, and then we provide an updated version. So in the updated version, what we're showing now is essentially about $750,000 would be done in a pay-go. So for the first few years, kind of looking at 2022 and 2023, because this TIF district is so new, there is a little bit of red just because you don't have a lot of revenue coming in. But when we start to showcase in 2024, in 2026, that's when we actually start to see revenue. So what we propose then is in 2026, when you actually have revenue coming in, that's when you'd be making the expenditures. So you'll see it kind of starts to definitely flow. So the analysis shows that this will definitely cash flow if you did have to give $750,000 in some type of a pay-go or an incentive. We'll just, again, want to kind of monitor that and tweak the numbers as you kind of work on a development agreement or look into options. So then one of the other things that is required now by the DOR that you're going to see in this packet is essentially we have to take kind of the estimated increment and kind of showcase out, okay, if that were to be broken out, how would that be? How much of the county would be contributing to that amount? How much would the city, the school district, the technical college? So we have that in there. And then the last piece of the puzzle that we have to include in a project plan is the legal description. So essentially we worked with the engineering firm and got that updated to have kind of the original and then the amended. So this was kind of reviewed by the Plan Commission. Basically what they did is they passed the resolution after the public hearing that said, yep, we want this forwarded on to basically the Common Council. So what we'll be looking for tonight is essentially kind of the next step in this process where you guys would be essentially adopting a resolution to allow the amendment to occur. We then have the project plan kind of finalized. We have to go through one more meeting with the joint review board where they basically do the same thing, where then the taxing jurisdictions kind of have an opportunity to look at everything, weigh on it, and then we send it to the DOR and see if there's any kind of changes or anything that we need to do. So what questions can I answer?
So what I would like is I would like that whole plan.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Because I would like to,
Not a problem.
okay. I don't think I think you've explained it quickly, but so that I understand it.
Yeah.
I'd like to, yeah, I'd like to just be able to have that.
The dollar amount's not seeing what we all have here is the commitment level you said is not, it can be adjusted.
Yes, there's absolutely nothing.
Start point.
Yeah, this is essentially saying the reason why you're making this amendment is for this potential development. But any type of dollars that you would be doing would have to approved by the Common Council through either a development agreement or you make the decision. What this is showing right now is you're saying if a developer were to come, because you're still kind of negotiating that, right now you'd be looking at a potential pay-go. But there's nothing, if you approve this, that does not mean you're giving a pay-go. It just means that that's the financing option that obviously is the most preferred because it's the least risk for you as the city.
Any further questions? I'll entertain a motion to approve resolution 2023 32, approving the proposed amended boundaries and project plan amendments for tax incremental district number 3. I'll second. Any further discussion? Please call the roll.
Wozdicki.
Aye.
Brown,
Yes.
Blaha.
Yep.
Brewster.
Aye.
Shelton.
Aye.
Zimmerman is absent. Nelson.
Aye.
Conley.
Motion carried. All right, then we're on item C, presentation and discussion of 2024 to 2028 capital improvements plan.
All right, so each of you should have these in front of you.
Nice paper in here.
Yeah, thank you. What I want you guys to focus on is in here is a presentation packet. If we're gonna pull that out, that's kind of gonna be what I'm gonna go over. And then we'll talk a little bit about the binder and kind of then answer any questions or concerns as we go through. If you got questions, please feel free to interrupt me and ask the question and we'll kind of go from there. But this is kind of the first kind of kickoff of the 2024 to 2028 capital improvement plan for the city of Kewaunee. So I'm the presenter. So just to give you a little bit of background, again, this is something that I've been doing for years with the city of Platteville for 3 years. I did all their CIPs for the village of Marshall and then for Hobart. And I'm working on, I think, 4 or 5 right now for different municipalities. So they're all kind of in the same boat. They're all looking at different options and trying to find ways to fund projects. So then on the next one here, just is a little bit of the introduction of why do you do a CIP? What is the reason behind that? Again, it's a long-range capital planning. It's a vital tool for any organization. It allows the room for forward thought and discussion. It better prepares an organization for change. It creates opportunities that may otherwise be overlooked. The other thing, as we all know, as we're talking about, is governments are faced with increasing expenditures and revenue limitations. So what this tries to do is create creative solutions that must be developed to meet these demands. And a long-range plan is key, obviously, to an entity's success. And the big one then is kind of looking at funding sources and uses are matched over a multi-year time frame. And then also looks at potential grant opportunities that can be used because you have a CIP, as well as when Baird goes through the rating process for you guys, if you are going out for bonds. One of the questions we get asked by any rating agency, whether it be Moody's or Corals and Brady, is do you have a long-term financial plan? And this is one of the first steps in that is by doing that, they're showcasing that, you know, again, you don't have the money to fund it, but you have the plan of how you're looking at trying to address these long-term projects for your residents. All right, so then on the next page is the planning process. So the intention is for this now to kind of become a yearly process. So what happens is it kickstarts in May with organizational meetings with the administrator and the clerk treasurer, where we kind of talk about, look at specifically what the timeline is going to be. Generally, then we have a kickoff meeting towards the end of May or June, which then looks at bringing in all the department heads and having the department heads kind of talk about, okay, let's talk about the previous plan. Let's look at all the information in there. And then June and July is really spent on kind of inventorying the assets, looking at establishing the priority rankings, and then kind of preparing draft financial forecasts, looking at, okay, these are all the projects, these are the estimated costs, how are we going to fund that? Then towards the end of July and August, then we start looking at preparing the project requests and then prioritizing the projects. And then at the end of August, we really kind of create the draft. And now we're into September, which is the draft now is in front of you to kind of look at and review. So that is kind of the plan here is every year that'll kind of continue, and that would be the process going forward. We are here, obviously, as Baird to help throughout that process, no matter what, and that's as much as you need. If the staff, you know, the long-term goal is for able to have the staff take this and kind of run with it and for us to be there. But continually, we understand with smaller staffs, smaller communities, that's why I'm here. So that's part of this process is we will continue to help. I will continue to help throughout it as long as you guys need this process. So then on the next page here just talks about the capital threshold policies. So some of the things we look at in creating the capital improvement plan is looking at individual tangible capital type items. That is generally what you are going to find in the CIP one item. That is not always going to be the case, but that's kind of the general rule we try to follow. It's either a piece of equipment, it's you're doing a road, etc. We generally try to cap it at a minimum value of $5,000 and then a useful life of more than 1 year following the date of the acquisition. The one here on the bottom is it applies to individual items rather than groups. We try to follow that. Sometimes that's not always the case, you know, especially when you're talking about certain departments where it's radios, you know, you may have a bunch of radios getting replaced. So we do allow those sometimes to be capped. Otherwise, we try to stay away from like desks and tables and things like that. But every once in a while that does kind of flow in here because it makes sense. All right. Here's the page, which I'm sure all you're looking at and it's probably scaring you. Don't let it scare you. The biggest thing to remember in here is this is a plan. So this is working with the staff and determining projects and trying to come up with a cost estimate. So obviously you as the elected officials and also the residents can see, okay, in the next 5 years, if money wasn't an object, what would we be doing? Or how would we be doing that? So as you can see here, we've identified, or the staff has worked to identify about $28 million worth of projects over the next 5 years. Now, obviously, how this works is when you talk, and when you're looking at the top part of this kind of table, you have the funding sources. So this is particularly basically the money. So right now, primarily, the only options you guys really have are using bond proceeds, general fund reserve, or essentially other sources. So your other sources are going to be, if you got a federal, grant coming in, that's particularly what that $807,000 is. It's federal money. Or there's grants potentially that you're aware of. So if you're working on a trail and you know that you're getting a DNR grant, potentially that could be something in the future that you put in here. But to kind of forecast over the 5 years, generally, most of the time in a CIP, you are going to see that it's going to be some type of bond proceeds. Because that typically is what every municipality is doing or looking at, is they're going to go out and bond for whatever those projects are. So we'll get into the bottom part of the tab here in a second. So let's go to the next page. So as you can see here, funding by sources. So what we put together is just a couple of different graphs that you'll find actually in your binder that showcase, okay, that top section of the table. So the funding sources. So as we talked about, what you can pretty much see in here is the majority of the funding or how these projects are being funded or proposed is through bond proceeds. So you can kind of see it's that bluish green bar number there. Then we've got a couple of other sources, that's the red, and then the general fund reserve, which is kind of the really tiny little orange there. That's what's being proposed in that area. So that's why you're seeing that. So then on the next page, it's just, again, kind of depending on how you view graphs or how you like to see things, we threw together a pie chart. Pretty much kind of the same message being touted here is, in order to fund these, what would be being proposed is using bond proceeds and then the other sources in the general fund reserve. All right, going back to that table then on the next slide here, for the next page, we're now going to focus on the use by categories. So as you can see, we've got the different departments. So we have Public Works, the Marina, the Water Utility, the Sewer Utility, Park and Recreation, the Police Department, and the Library. You can see over the 5 years here, what is being kind of proposed in total dollars and uses, and then overall kind of how that flows into the total. Obviously with Public Works kind of being the most, and then your water and sewer utility, that's pretty common in most CIPs because those are usually your high dollar items. Those are going to be your roads, your pipelines, your water lines, everything else, your big pieces of equipment. One of the things we're looking at proposing in here is, in a perfect world, you would start the conversation of, okay, if money wasn't an object, we'd be looking at building kind of contingency or reserve accounts. So as this plan continues to evolve from year to year, you can start to have those conversations about, does it make sense to have a squad car replacement reserve? That's pretty common in a lot of municipalities. Again, it's also dependent on funding. So you can propose it, but you have to be able to fund it. So those are just some of the things you consider. Is we've looked at, when talking with the police department, there were really two areas. One was kind of a squad car replacement reserve and the police contingency fund. As this CIP continues to move from year to year, there are some considerations where if maybe you did get a grant that was related to public works or specifically parks, that sometimes goes in there, and then you kind of have a playground contingency fund, those type of things. So as that kind of process continues to go, and as kind of the department heads get more comfortable with that, we can look at increasing that or having those conversations based on kind of what the flavor in the room is. All right, so then kind of going to the next one here, again, just kind of some different charts so you can kind of see how everything's flowing. So we've got kind of the different departments. Obviously, again, Public Works being the highest dollar amount due to roads and everything else. You're seeing that is kind of dominating, obviously, this chart showing the different years. So 2028 is orange. The reason that also you're seeing for most of these departments that's the highest is because we're projecting that out the furthest. So we're kind of throwing in a lot of the projects so you can kind of see that. The intention would be, as we kind of redo this every year, you're going to see things kind of swap and shift based on kind of the need and what's going on. All right, then on the next page here, kind of just again, another way to showcase the chart. So it's a pie, basically a pie chart here showing you the different areas. Public Works obviously being the most at 62%. Then you've got the Marina at 13, water utility at 13, the sewer utility at 10, and then all the other various funds kind of making up those different areas as well. All right, so then on the next page, what you are going to find in your packet here, or your book, is each department has their own summary page. So what we did is each department kind of maps out, or had the opportunity to map out over the next 5 years, What do they forecast as potential projects that could occur? Again, these are all potential projects. This is not committing that you are going to be funding anything in this document. It really is a guide so you can start to see and have those conversations when funding comes up or questions come up. Okay, if we do this project, what does that mean? What does that delay? You know, same thing. So for public works, if you do a street project, what potentially would that delay in other areas? So you can see in here, we've got, specific streets being done every year. We have the project engineering and contingency costs, looking at trying to do seal coating and cold mix every year, road resurfacing, and then blending in throughout the next 5 years, kind of the individual plans. So what you will find here is this is going to list all the projects. And then if you go to the next page, each project then has an individual program or project page. So it gives you more detail into what makes up those dollar amounts. So it talks about the description, talks about the year that it's occurring in, provides you some justification and understanding. So you can kind of see that, shows the costs, the bond proceeds, and then the budget impacts, so that you have that in there. Then each individual department also then has what is the kind of 2024, whatever year you're in, you're going to find a section that just showcases what they're requesting. So you can kind of see in the year what stacks up, because the plan then is what you do is after the capital improvement plan has either been accepted or adopted. We can talk about that in a second. What we try to do then is take out the information, give that to kind of Heath and Joanne, and allow them to plug that into the budget and see what happens and kind of play that out and see if that would be funded or if it can't, or what's kind of the idea. The other thing then you'll see is that we try to have, and this is something that our plan is to build this as it continues to kind of flow, is to have a beyond the 5-year projection. So what we want department heads to kind of get comfortable with is thinking out, okay, you've got your 5 years of projects, but then also start to prioritize and think about kind of those long-term projects that may be occurring. That way, again, when you're thinking about grant opportunities, or particularly the main reason this becomes effective as we did this in Platteville is we listed out 80 years of our roads because we were 104 years behind. It was about 80 million. Our CIP was $80 million. There was no way we were funding that, but we did that on purpose because we knew we had roads that particularly had water main breaks, had sewer main breaks. So we started to look at those priorities and go, okay, well, that road technically isn't supposed to get replaced till 2045. But within this year, we've had 6 water main breaks. It shifts the priority focus and kind of gives you the ability to look at that. Or when you have a resident come to you in question and go, hey, when is my road getting done? If you continue to build this out, that's kind of your ability to say, look, we understand we want to get you a road, but there's also X amount of projects that are in here. You have to be a way to, CIPs are daunting, but the way I explain it is you put all the money in, you put all the information into there, and you come up with a plan to start chipping away at it. Sometimes you're able to chip away at it really fast. Sometimes you're not so much. We'll get into that to kind of talk about what we've been talking about with the borrowings. But that's the point of this, is to start putting things in there so that you can see those prioritization projects and start thinking about, okay, if you want to do this project, what does that mean for all the other projects?
I have a question.
Yeah.
This takes you back to 2028. I mean, we're looking at the bond proceeds and we all of a sudden jump to 13 million in 2028. Why is that?
So primarily 2028 is more when we get to the way kind of CIPs work is when I work with the department heads, I tell them, okay, 2024 and 2025, I want you to focus on trying to get as close to actual costs as you can. When you start to get into the 2026, 2027, and 2028, those are more projective years or projected projects. So the reason we put those on there is, yes, in a perfect world, if money was no question, we'd like to do that. But in reality, you may know, and I think we know, that's not going to be what's going to happen. So what we try to do is we try to put those in there so that way, if there are particular grant programs, specifically the ones I'm thinking of are like with roads, when it's the LRIP programs and those different ones, if you have that in a CIP and you identify that, you can submit that and showcase that. So that's why we put them in there instead of beyond 5 years.
But there's just such a big jump.
There is, and it's because it's more cost. So it's primarily, if you're looking specifically at this one, which I think is
You
roads.
went from 3 million up to 13 million.
Right. And the main reason, if you look at that, is when we structured it in 2024 through 2027, we tried to break it out to be one road a year.
Okay.
And then in 2028, you can see on there, we've got Center Street, Lincoln Street, Fifth Street, Harrison Street. So we kind of did that on
That makes
purpose.
sense.
That's why is the structure would be in a perfect scenario. You're probably doing about one road project a year, but to showcase your CIP in your 2028, which kind of is more speculative, You throw in projects where potentially if there were grant funding, you may shift a road up, or you may have those considerations. So it could be, as you guys are looking at that, if, you know, there is additional funds out there, or you're determining something happens where one of those streets has a serious break or something, you may want to consider moving those out.
So I guess what you started out by saying is essentially this is gonna be a wish list that we're gonna be working off of, right? I guess when I look at something that's millions of dollars more than we're ever gonna have.
Yep.
Why aren't we tasking our department heads with more realistic priorities and telling us this is a must have in the next 5 years? It's exceeded its lifetime already. And then instead of them spending all the time and saying, well, we should probably replace this road in 2045.
So I'm gonna get to that because we're almost there.
And the other thing, if it's now or later, is I see fire and rescue. I don't see them in here.
Yep, so that was something that we looked at adding in the future. I know we reached out to have them add information to the document, but I don't think we ever got.
I tried multiple times to get them to give me stuff. I can't do it for them.
The good news is they don't have any needs. Apparently. Which I know better, but
Yeah, I know.
it'd be nice to have a priority.
And that's, yeah, in the future, that would be one of the goals that we would want to do, is include that in the next one, is to look at, okay, what is fire and EMS? Because, yeah, I know Heath reached out multiple times. I saw the CCs on those emails. And again, so the point of why we do this in kind of two phases, because you're hitting it right on the head there, is as we're going to talk about in a little bit, we know what your funding capacity is. So you want to have your CIP be two things. You want to always show in there, you know, it's not a wish list, but it's truly, this is what you would be doing or trying to do if you had the financial means to do it. And so that's what I asked the staff to kind of put together was, okay, if money wasn't an object, what would you be trying to do in the next 5 years? And that's kind of the list. What we get to now is when you get to the section here, that's kind of on this page right here, where I start to go through the funding options. This is where now kind of the conversation starts. Is we know that what we have proposed or what we're looking at doing is kind of getting on this borrowing plan. Where we're looking at about $500,000 to be allocated every year for CIP. So what I did was work with the staff on looking at through basically the first part of this, which is all of the projects that they included. What are some scenarios then of what you can do? Because we only borrowed $500,000, knowing that, you know, that is going to be an impact on the taxpayer. So we looked at some options. So option one that I kind of have in here kind of showcases what could you do looking at that $500,000 mark for basically borrowing, creating the general fund reserve of $35,000. So using general fund reserves to kind of fund some of those contingency items that you want to start doing. And then the other source that you're getting from there. So what we looked at was, you know, particularly one option would be looking at the seal coating and particularly then the road resurfacing and doing a reduced amount and focusing on that. And then trying to fund some of the other items that are in there, such as those, you know, high ticket items like your snow plows, your street sweepers, those things like that. And looking at that over 5 years. So this was kind of one scenario of what could be proposed to do that. Now, again, at the end of the day, as the elected officials, you have the authority in the budget. So when it comes to that budgetary item of what you're funding for that, that's kind of this process is now you look at all the projects and you start to chip away at, okay, we've got $500,000, what we can do. So this is one option. The drawback to this is you're not really hitting a road because you're just kind of chipping out that road resurfacing and basically, you know, kind of doing the seal coating. There's a lot of municipalities that are in that situation. That's all they can do. You know, in order to be able to do that, that's one option. So then we looked at option number two, which was, okay, what then would happen if we did not do the general fund reserve? So essentially don't touch the general fund reserves, stick at the 500,000 and just use the other sources. And then in this scenario, try to fund 100% what was requested of the seal coating and the road resurfacing. So instead of doing a reduced, we looked at doing what was basically proposed in the budget or in the CIP and try to fund that. And then after that, try to sprinkle in everything else. The keys we looked at is we tried to make sure that a lot of the police items we funded because that's public safety and you want to make sure that that continues to be at, you know, the tools and resources they're using are funded fully. So those items we tried to keep the same. The downfall that we ran into this scenario was then potentially that is pushing off some of more of the other large items. So your dump trucks, your snow plows, your things like that. So that's kind of the cost benefit analysis that's gonna have to be looked at. Then in funding scenario 3, what we tried to look at is, okay, what if we tried to target a road and tried to replace that? So particularly with that, we looked at what was one that would fit within the $500,000 kind of estimated bond proceeds. Harrison Street was one that was identified in the 5 years as potentially being one that needed to be replaced. So we tried to look at tackling that in 2024. And then for the next 5 years or the next 4 years, then look at trying to attack some of the equipment. So delaying some of those items that were in 2024 and trying to get back to them in 2025. So in 2025, we go after the plow truck. We then try to do some other updates that needed to occur in 2026. We then did the street sweeper. In 2027, then we looked at some other large ticket items for DPW and kind of come up with that. So this is kind of the process. Is your CIP, you want to have all those items in that book so you can identify those projects. And then the next phase of this, after the CIP has been accepted or adopted, is you kind of get down to the numbers where you start to look at, okay, let's identify, we know our funding source is this. How do we start chipping away at that? So that was one of the things I anticipated was going to be a question is, okay, here's everything that's being requested, but we're over here. How do we get there? And that's kind of the next step is looking at, okay, here's the projects, what makes sense for you as the elected officials, as the staff to try to understand the balancing of what needs to be funded, what can't. And what are those priorities?
This also gives you the opportunity for grants because you've got a
Yes.
visual you can kind of look at, right?
It does. Yep.
Sounds to me like eventually what's gonna, the long run, just to make long story short, this council will have to meet with the department heads and just decide what projects we're gonna do. I mean, we've got the plan, but it doesn't necessarily mean that that's what's gonna happen.
Well, I think that you had said it earlier. I mean, all of a sudden, something happens, you have 6 water main breaks on this street. That just got bumped way up the list. And now you have to make a cut of a project that was already forecast for that year. And that, I think, John, would probably come through committee and that would be a budget time conversation on your CIP going forward, right, for the next year?
Yeah, so typically how in the municipalities I was in, is you present the CIP to the council, you'd have them accept it or adopt it. Now, the reason it's twofold. This, by adopting this, in no way are you committing that you're funding every single thing in this book. So that's where some people get a little weary of using the term adopted. So in some municipalities that I was in, they would accept it. That way, the reason you do that is you want something on the record that was approved by the city council that essentially establishes that this exists. Because when we're talking to bondholders and when we're talking to grant agencies, they're gonna go, well, is the council made aware of that? Yes, they understand it's in the plan. They understand it may not be funded. So then typically what would happen is after this was accepted, it then went to kind of the funding scenario situation where you would sit down, the department heads would all sit down and we'd look at, okay, this is what we're anticipating as the budget. So in this scenario, as we've looked at, we've talked about doing about $500,000 a year in capital improvement projects. So that kind of becomes a department discussion with an understanding of what I typically would do is have a conversation with the council when I was the city administrator and said, okay, I need some parameters when I'm working with the department heads of what is it? Are you willing to go up to this? Are you willing to go down to that? Do you want me to stick to that number? And if it's 500,000, then I go back and say, all right, here's our cap. Well, I need to know from each department, what is your number one project? And we kind of did that scenario when I met with them last week, was talking about that and looking at this and saying, okay, I want you to start thinking about what is that number one project that you want to put forward. And then at the end of the day, it eventually comes back to the conversation for you as the council is, okay, here's everything that staff looked at. And you have some decisions to make. Either you can go above or knowing the financial situation, you're going to say, no, we have to stay at this. So we're only going to be able to fund this.
But that's what I want the council and staff to understand is, okay, 2025, it shows that my department is getting this.
Right.
Well, it's in the forecast, but it doesn't mean that the council is gonna say, yes, we're gonna budget that CIP line item for the 2025 budget, just so everybody knows.
Yes.
You guys don't get pushed in a direction on a given year, because I've felt that push in the past, so.
Yeah, the plan, this is again, it's a planning document. So it's in a perfect scenario, that's what we would be doing. But just as you indicated, if you have 5 waterman breaks that occur in a year, that's going to become a priority over some of the other items.
Right.
And so the plan with this is we don't eliminate those projects, it's they get delayed.
Yep.
And so it's, again, it comes back to you where it's, what happens is, and again, with transition and turnover, whether it's staff or whether it's the council, you want to be able to kind of have that continual document that goes for years. So
Kind
that
of like your car, if the brakes go out, you're not getting that new paint job this year.
That's correct. Exactly.
Sorry, John.
No, I wasn't suggesting that we didn't adopt it. I
Oh,
just
yeah.
said at some point in time,
Yep.
we'll have to sit down with staff and say, you know, okay, what do you want to do?
Right.
Here's so much money we have.
Exactly.
So we're just having the opening discussion on this tonight, right?
Yes, so the game plan is you now have these at your disposal, look them over. If you see any questions or concerns that come up, I'd ask you to direct them to Heath. Heath then will direct them to me. And then the plan would be at the next common council meeting, we would be asking you guys to do some formal acceptance or adoption of your pleasures. And this kind of becomes the norm.
Norm can be good. Does anyone have any questions?
Nope.
Yeah, I just think this is a great, this will be a great tool. I know I've lived in other places where they, you know, they forecast the road improvements or the alley improvements for 15 years out, and you know when your alley's gonna, you know when your alley or your road is gonna get re-bricked or whatever. It's good. It's good for the public. It's good for us to kind of have a focus.
It definitely is, because I can tell you, I was doing this before at a presentation for another municipality I was in, and we were just about to present this same thing. And they had the exact same problem you just indicated, Mayor, is they had a project that they had to get funded. And it was horse trading. You could hear it. They were going, well, let's do this, let's do that, without kind of considering like, well, hold on. If you eliminate that project, are you prepared to cut this one? So this is kind of something where it's nice to have that handy tool at your disposal at any meeting where you can go, all right, let's, you know, before we jump down that, which we may need to do, let's consider the pros and cons of what that means. So it definitely is a helpful tool.
All right. Yeah. Okay. We'll move on to item 8B, ordinance 2020. That's right. You're looking at-
No, I
Oh,
was,
sorry.
sorry.
Sorry, corner of my eye. Ordinance 2023-643, amending chapter 6 of municipal code to allow for administrative issuance of temporary class B liquor picnic licenses.
Yes, after a couple of special common council meetings that have been held for only one purpose. Some of the members had suggested we used to do this administratively, except there's no support for doing so under municipal code. There is under state law, but not in our municipal code. So the best way to do that is to simply authorize it under municipal code. That way, we no longer have to get 6 of you together so we could approve somebody's picnic license. So we're suggesting an amendment to section 636-33 2B, which will be amended as follows. Picnic, it's a listing of different types of licenses. Picnic set per current fee schedule, see with stats section 125.26 parent 6. City council provides prior authorization for these temporary licenses to be issued by the city clerk with addition of the following language. Additional language subject to passing background search of applicants.
I'll make a motion to approve ordinance 2023-643.
I'll second that.
And now for some discussion, you read it with the background check, so everyone understands it's not in this document, but it'll be included, right?
It'll be included in the ordinance as
Okay, so we had
revised.
Eric and John. Any further discussion? Do we roll on it? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. 8E, authorizing increase in hiring wage for street shop laborer.
Public Works interviewed a candidate for the position of street shop laborer who currently has a CDL Class B license. Starting pay for the position is $20.50 per hour. Candidate requested an increase in the pay range above that rate to a range between $21 and $23. Personnel committee suggested a range of $21.50 to $22, and finance committee also further recommended the same range. I should note the candidate has indicated $21.50 is fine. They said that's perfectly fine. So all we're asking for is a motion authorizing hiring at a wage of $21.50 to $22.
I'll make a motion.
I'll second that.
Any further discussion? Please call the roll.
Wiznicki.
Aye.
Brown. Yes. Blaha.
Yes, ma'am.
Brewster.
Aye.
Shelton. Zimmerman's absent. Nelson. Conley.
Motion carried. 8F, approve purchase of ambulance chassis using available grant funds.
Yeah, the council authorized previously to have the ambulance director spend the remainder of the available one-time ARPA FIP grant funding on the purchase of a new ambulance vehicle. Joe Steiner has followed up with a discussion with the manufacturer, and the invoices attached to this. Found the city can purchase or place an order at least for an ambulance chassis with the full vehicle to be delivered likely in 2025. The cost of the chassis has been quoted at $47,062, though it was also indicated this cost could go up. The quote is based on current year cost information. With that in mind, the finance committee recommended council authorize purchase of the chassis using the remainder of the grant funds and supplement with available ambulance fund monies. Total amount of grant funding remaining is $37,785, which is currently located in Fund 401. Remainder would come from the separate ambulance funds. So that's all we're looking for, is just a motion to authorize purchase.
And just a side note to that, the cooperative townships that get the rescue service were unanimously in support as well, so. So do we have a motion?
I'll second.
All right, so we have a motion and a second to approve the purchase of the ambulance chassis using the available grant funds, and then the remaining funds will come from the ambulance fund. All right, please call the roll.
Wiznicki.
Aye.
Brown. Yes. Blaha.
Yes.
Brewster.
Aye.
Shelton.
Aye.
Zimmerman's absent. Nelson. Conley.
Motion carried. 8G, approve reimbursement for transient slip overpayment.
Mr. Wolfgang Wolfel submitted a transient slip rental form for use of a slip in the marina with dates scheduled from July 26th through September 6th. He lives out of state, and this was a replacement for using a different marina, and due to unforeseen circumstances, he had to leave on August 25th. Which means his rental was for 30 nights rather than 42 nights, and he had paid for this rental in advance with partial payments in May and April and May. He requested reimbursement. As this is a refund issue, staff needs council approval to effect a reimbursement. Calculated the total cost reimbursement at $368.57.
How did we calculate that heat?
It was based on the
Length of the boat?
length, yeah, his transient rate was based on the length of the boat and the amount of time. The per foot slip rate, which was 85 cents per foot, I think. And then multiplied that by the number of days that he was requesting refund.
Have we contacted him about this to find out if that's acceptable to him?
Well, that's all he's asking for. He was asking for that refund.
Oh, he was asking for this.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
He requested.
No, he was
refund, so
asking, okay,
so
that was the dollar amount he's
yeah,
basically asking.
he didn't know the specific dollar amount. He just was requesting that we reimburse him for the.
Okay, no, I was just wondering how we arrived at the dollar amount. Okay.
Yeah.
Did he inform, when did he inform us that he was gonna be leaving?
He informed them, what, 1 or 2 days prior to his departure that he had to leave.
It was August. I was at the conference, so.
Yeah, you were at the conference, yeah.
So we did have advance notice.
Yeah,
3 weeks after he's been gone.
Yeah, no, I
Oh,
left
by the
already.
way.
No, he,
We had advance notice and it was after or the 30 days, which we have a rate change. So anything over 30 days is a cheaper rate. So I mean, everything still occurred. It's not like he left 28 days or 27 days. He left at 30, so.
And it'll be noted that we will be looking at our contracts, cleaning up our contracts a little clearer, so. Okay, so do we have a motion to give a reimbursement for the transient slip at $368.57?
I'll make them.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Any further discussion? Please call the roll.
Wiznicki.
Aye.
Brown. Yes. Blaha.
Yes.
Brewster.
Aye.
Shelton. Zimmerman's absent. Nelson. Conley.
Motion carried. 8H, approve bid for 4th Street paving project. Out off the press.
Yeah, you each have the one bid we received on Northeast Asphalt. Brandon is here to answer any questions about the bid itself, but that's the only bid we had. Total was for $24,780.40 for the milling unit price, and then for the cost of the installation of the asphalt was $64,080. Do you want to address any of the issue?
Yeah. Hey, everybody, how's it going? So yeah, staff had asked me to just kind of take a look at this too, just for a second set of eyes, and I think Nate was anticipating with his due date today that he would maybe not be here. So I was here this morning with Joanne for the bid opening, and then just looked through it from the bid advertisement. It was there, the scope of work and services and everything that was put out in the bid ad. The estimate, I think, covers that. Only thing that I did notice was that with the bid ad was to cover for any erosion control that there might be. And under the notes from Northeast Asphalt that their price did not include that. But just thinking about it with a mill and removal of asphalt and paving project, there really shouldn't be any. If anything, it would just be a couple of catch basins that would have to be covered. So that's something that staff could probably do, or the contractor probably pay for a small fee, just put in basically a silt fence over the grate for your stormwater catch basins.
Sure, so what would your projected opinion of probable cost be on that?
It's probably something staff could do in a matter of an hour and $50 worth of materials type.
Yeah,
thing.
that's what I figured.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Real-
So it's real material what it needs to be done.
Yep. Yep.
And the projected cost of this originally was about 90.
I think it was somewhere around there. We didn't give any estimates or anything for that, but if I remember right from the budgetary numbers, just being at different meetings, it was somewhere in that $90,000 to $100,000, I think was what was budgeted somewhere in there.
Is it common on this scope of this type of project to only get one bidder on it, or is it uncommon?
It's, I would say in this situation, it's kind of common. Everybody's really busy. There's a lot of work going on these days. We're a little bit late in the year. And really besides Northeast, maybe MCC would throw in a price, or, that would maybe Scott's would otherwise too. But I think given the time of year where we're at, it's probably safe to say that you might only get 1, 2 at most. But even just looking at, the price that they gave per ton for asphalt, or the price for removal for the millions and stuff like that, I think it's a competitive price. It's not that their numbers are out of line, I guess, in my opinion.
Brandon is correct. You tend to see these bid documents going out much earlier in the year, usually April and May.
Yep.
And they're just starting to get around to taking bids.
And if it's a utility project, there's, 30 utility contractors that are in the Green Bay area where you get more bids probably for that, but for a straight up paving project, it's really not that surprising just to see one.
And according to our purchasing policy, if it's just one bid, it just takes 3/4 of the council to pass it.
So then the only other things that I noted just from reading through it was they did have a note too that it needs to be accepted within 10 days and then the work completed by November 1st. So if this is something that the council is considering, you guys probably would want to make a motion on it to accept that, just to get it back to them. Otherwise, they may increase their prices. Yeah, exactly.
All right, if there aren't any further questions, I would entertain a motion to approve the bid for the 4th Street paving project, not to exceed $90,000.
I'll make a motion to approve award the bid to the selected contractor as recommended by staff.
Northeast Asphalt.
Northeast Asphalt.
Okay. Is there a second?
One second.
Any further discussion? Please call the roll.
Woznicki,
Aye.
Brown,
Yes.
Blaha,
Yes.
Brewster.
Aye.
Shelton,
Aye.
Zimmerman is absent, Nelson,
Aye.
Conley.
Thanks, Brandon. Motion carried. All right, 8I, approved playground equipment purchase for Father Marquette Park.
Yeah, Public Works is seeking a replacement for the playground equipment at Father Marquette Park. Staff sought proposal estimates for replacing their equipment, which included only minimal to site preparation, shipping and installation. Staff would remove the existing equipment and then after installation, install the required playground surfacing as required by state law. Staff received 3 estimates, which are included in your package, one from Compan for $48,263.40, Northland Recreation for 34,409 and the Lee Recreation LLC for 27,522. Each one has their various differences in design. Staff general recommendation is to go with option number 3, as that the one that most easily fit within the budget.
We do have about $21,000 left in the building maintenance. About 6,200 of that is already committed, but there's 12,000 also left. In the equipment maintenance, so the money should be there for that.
Why did we choose this part? to redo the equipment and not
It was budgeted, this year, right? But I don't know why.
We talked about that at the Public Works meeting. The reason he chose Father Marquette Park was the structure that there, the wooden structure is pretty much weathered. And what they want to do is get the beach all set to go at Father Marquette Park, get that back into shape. Get that back into shape. So Nathan and the Parks Director thought that that should be the park where we should start. So that's why they decided Father Marquette Park.
So it just seems like if the local kids want to go there, it's not real convenient.
Well, I guess it's, I suppose if we went to Selner Park, someone would say, why didn't you go to this park or that park?
That's what I was
So-
wondering, how did he?
Yeah, and they talked about it at the Public Works Committee meeting. It was mentioned, that was asked too, and those were the reasons that they gave. That the Parks Director gave and that the Public Works Director gave, where they thought that would be the better, what they intend on doing. And what the Parks Director said he would like to do is go to the other organizations in town. Rotary, some of the other organizations, Lions Club, and look for possible donations for help in other parks too. And he said he would do
Because I see
that.
this is in the CIP 3 years from now.
Mhm. Those were the reasons that were.
Wendy?
And so I did notice, I mean, Kewick Park is in Jim and my district. And I have fielded all sorts of wishes for new equipment in Kewick Park. And I'm like, Father Marquette Park, like, I just don't, I would just rather have it be Kewick. And also in one of the estimates, they mentioned Kewick Park and the Compan, Father Marquette and Kewick Parks. Do you know why was that being considered to put it in both?
No, because they only have so much money.
But in the
put into
quote,
it.
in the quote, project name, Father Marquette and Kewick Parks.
Which quote is that?
That's Compan.
Okay. That bid was also $48,263. Like I said, both at the Public Works meeting, both the Parks Director and Nathan thought that would be the best place to spend the money. Would be at Father Marquette Park, because he said he wanted to get the beach back in order and the condition of the equipment there, so. It's up to you guys.
Yeah.
I suppose everybody who has a district wants it in their district, so. I don't know.
Yep.
You want it there because that's your district, but.
Not gonna lie.
But that's not it wasn't chosen
I'm
because,
guessing, and I wasn't
it
at the
just
public
happened
works
to
meeting,
be
but
that-
I'm guessing that the safety of the equipment at the site is what dictated.
that was pretty much about it, yeah.
If you go to Kewick, it is a disaster. I'm just saying.
Well, then I guess you're gonna have to vote no.
Like John said, it wasn't chosen by anyone for a specific.
No, it wasn't
was-
chosen.
It was recommended by parks personnel and named. So.
Rotary to give someone.
Are we looking to do the
Am I-
here still?
Yes.
Yes.
That's fine.
Yeah, they're gonna buy it, but they're not gonna install it till next year.
I
I
thought.
thought they were
I
getting
thought
it for us.
Yeah.
They're gonna get it, not the way I wrote down.
That's,
Yeah.
Says
it'll be in.
I wrote down installation next year. That's
No.
what I wrote down. Isn't that what you got out of it? Eric, I don't know.
I'm pretty
Oh, I
sure
don't remember the installation.
Yeah, I could be wrong, but I mean, I wrote it down
this
here.
equipment is included. in-
Installation next year.
Anticipated to be installed before the winter freeze.
Yeah, it's coming out of 2023 budget, yeah.
And is anticipated to be installed before the winter freeze.
Install these.
So to be clear, like I'm all about getting new equipment. We do have money in the budget. I just wish it were for Kewaunee Park.
2024 budget season.
Sure we do.
Or my understanding was the plan is to try to replace all of it, correct?
Sure, you can't, you can't.
Right.
All the equipment
Right,
in
but
every part.
that is the plan. It's not like.
All right, so would we have a motion to approve Lee, what is it, Recreation? Lee Recreation LLC for a nucleus playground structure at an estimated price of $27,522.
I'll move.
Is there a second? Awesome. Any further discussion? Please call the roll.
Wozdicki.
Aye.
Brown.
Yes.
Blaha.
Yes.
Brewster.
Aye.
Shelton. Zimmerman's absent. Nelson.
Aye.
Conley.
Motion carried. 8J, approve cleanout costs for rebeds at the wastewater treatment facility.
Yeah, this was a request by Public Works Committee to move this over to council for approval. They're gonna essentially excavate 2 of the reed beds. There's, I think, 6 of them over there. They're moving that out and then having it hauled away. We got 3 quotes from various contractors for doing the work, one from Jaden at $32 a ton for a total cost of $38,400. Peters Concrete submitted with a price of $50,500, and then DeGroot at an estimated $40 a ton, which at the same tonnage as previously would have been $48,000. Staff's general recommendation is to accept the offer from Jaden to do the work.
A little bit.
Plus, I believe they had done it before, so.
Yeah, this is a maintenance thing there if some of you aren't familiar with the rebeds, so. Do we have a motion to approve the quote from Jaden Incorporated at $32 a ton for a total cost of $38,400 to clean out the reed beds? Nelson?
I'll second it.
Any further discussion? Please call the roll.
Wozdicki.
Abstain.
Brown.
Yes.
Blaha.
Yep.
Brewster.
Aye.
Shelton.
Aye.
Zimmerman's absent. Nelson.
Aye.
Conley.
Motion carried. 8K, financial reports, month ending June 2023.
We been reviewed.
Okay, no questions on that? All right, 9 announcements.
For the public, property committee meeting on the 6th, on Thursday, September 21st. I'd like to have it down at the marina. Augie's gonna give us a tour,
What's the date of that?
show us the marina.
Can you send out an email?
Sure.
To that?
I can send that out.
Sometimes I don't know what today is. 11th. All right, if there are no other announcements, a motion to adjourn.
So.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.